Hello everyone and welcome to another Scots Way podcast, and today I'm joined by singer, photographer, filmmaker and author Marianne Dissard. Hello Marianne.
I have to slow you down and see if you forgot anything. You got it down.
I tried my best to include everything. And if you hear some lovely background ambience, it's because we're sat today in the Hidden Gardens in the south side of Glasgow on a beautiful morning. Thanks for suggesting it.
Of course, it struck me, this place, Hidden Garden, it says Peak Glasgow. You've got the mosque and the chants coming in through the birch trees. You've got the sound of the train, a little bit of traffic. Some people practicing Tai Chi out there.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't make much sound, but they're there.
It's perfect to find a quiet
And birds.
spot in the middle of the city. So there's a lot to cover, as that introduction suggests. Can you tell us a bit about your life and work? How did you...
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a general overview, and then we'll get into the detail.
Born in France, south of France, small rural town. Moved to the US, Phoenix, Arizona. Big, massive, cancerous growth of a megapolis. When I was 16 with my family. Then went on to study filmmaking in Los Angeles, and then got the music bug when I landed in Tucson, Arizona at the age of 22 or 23. And that took over for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Became a singer, started touring, recording, and ended up moving back to Europe about 10 years ago. And drifted along between France, Germany, Italy, eventually landing in Kent, Ramsgate in Kent in 2017.
Right.
Just after Brexit. Perfect timing. See what was up with that. And then made it to Glasgow and moved to Glasgow 6 months ago.
And let's start more recently, and then we can move our way back. You had an exhibition of photography at the Glasgow Gallery. What can you tell us about that and the style of photography that you do?
When in 2020 all my touring was cancelled, I thought I was stuck in the US, actually in Arizona, and really wanted to come back to Ramsgate and pick up photography. Do something to face the times that we were living in.
Yeah.
So I made it back. It took me 6 months actually to feel safe enough to get on a plane. But by October 2020, I was back in Ramsgate. And from day 10, after quarantine back in them days,
of course.
I hit the ground running. And I went out every single day with a little camera and photographed Ramsgate. Or, basically the 1 square mile we were allowed at that time of lockdowns and repeated lockdowns and Christmas being cancelled. And I did that for about 6 months. And then a year ago, in summer 2021, I put out those images as posters on a massive length of industrial fence in Ramsgate. Big posters, 400 of them, 60 meter worth of stuff. And then left it up there for 2 months and stood there by my fence, and people from the town whose photos it was just came in, streamed in, and we talked. And then that led to a gallery being interested, and then all of a sudden I had to figure out how to be a gallery photographer, an artist.
Sure.
And went on with this, which eventually led to the Glasgow Gallery of Photography offering me a solo show this summer. And so that stayed on for a month, and because I'm not just a photographer, I also brought in people, set designer from Paris that I used to work with on my stage shows. My music producer, Raphael Mann, who also did the foreword to the exhibition, etc. So it was a bit of an installation.
And what comes across there, and with a lot of the other things you've done, is the importance of collaboration. Is that kind of central to a lot of what you do?
Not always. I wrote a book once, a memoir, sorry tales of my touring life and traumatic experience with eating disorders and all kind of funny things. And that was just basically me.
Well,
I don't think anybody could have helped. Well, of course there was a designer for the book cover, etc., and a few people that read it and tore it apart, etc. But it's a pretty lonely experience.
As someone who used to be an editor, I've never worked on a memoir or anything so personal as an autobiography. How difficult is that to kind of work together with someone who's editing when it's your story?
No, it's not, because once you start writing, it's not your story anymore. It's a story. You have to find a way to put that story across. So it becomes words, and they have to make sense. And it becomes, in a strange way, it becomes a fiction. I mean, you become the writer writing about that person. That's also you. But it can't just be you, because that's not a good book.
Yeah.
So, it's easy to edit.
Okay, that's interesting.
And you know, my English is okay, but it's not perfect. So,
and going back to the exhibition in Glasgow, how come you came to exhibit in Glasgow? It's just that they offered you the chance to do it.
I moved to Glasgow.
You're already here, okay.
I was fed up with living in Kent and England. I was done. 5 years was plenty, and so I still wanted to be in the UK. Still wanted to speak English. Still wanted to be somewhere. And of course, Glasgow made sense. I didn't know anybody here 6 months ago.
Right.
I just showed up and got a flat, and I hadn't actually owned furniture for like almost 10 years since I left Arizona. So I had to figure out how to do that. But within a few weeks, I was getting antsy. It's like, come on, there's more to life than just figuring out where your table is going to go in the living room. So I put all my prints in a taxi and just went downtown and said, give me a show.
Fantastic.
And they did, to my big surprise.
And what was the reaction to the show? It's been...
No, that was great.
Yeah.
I was there most days, just greeting people, talking to people, watching people look at the exhibition, learning from what they got, what they didn't get. I talked to a lot of photographers that came through, and over the weeks, more and more people seem to have come by. So we must have been doing something right. I mean, I was passing out flyers in front of Goma to like random tourists and bored teenagers, so something must have worked.
Excellent. And what was the title of the exhibition?
On a Good Day, You Can See France.
That's right. So how was that reflected in the photos themselves?
Well, Ramsgate is on the coast of Kent,
Yeah.
facing the continent. So on a good day or on a clear day, you can actually see the cliffs of Calais and, little ferry going by and stuff like that. But, it has to do with, of course, Brexit.
Yeah.
On a really lousy day, which seems to be most days these days in the UK, you really can't even see France. Plus, there was one thing that happened December 2020. Macron, the French president, closed the borders because of the Delta variant, which, actually originated in Kent. So thousands of truckers, lorries, got stuck in the UK. Eastern European drivers, Polish, lots of them, just a few days before Christmas, and they couldn't cross over. So I went out and took photos of what used to be an airport runway, abandoned since, where over 5,000 lorries were stuck there. And that was one of the strongest images in the show, I think. But it meant a lot. It's not just COVID, it's also borders and Brexit and closures, etc., etc.
Yeah. And I believe you're working on a project inspired by the River Clyde.
Yes, I am actually. Maybe it's because when I lived in Arizona for 25 years, we didn't have water in our rivers. It's just such a wonderful thing.
And now you're in a city with lots of water.
Yeah, I know, coming down from underneath, from under my feet, from everywhere. No, I think it was pure intuition at first when I started crossing over the river on the bridges and realizing that maybe as a complete foreigner to this nation, I have no idea what Scotland is about. But if I was to investigate and to make my way through that understanding, a river was in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Because a river is present, past, and future. There's been human activities, there's been nature activities, organic activities. There's all kind of myth attached to it and realities too, of what the river has meant to not just Glasgow but Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. And this city in particular, I think, the links to the Clyde in terms of being built by the Clyde are very strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I haven't read any Scottish literature.
Oh, I can,
but the first thing I did was to pick up all those technical, super boring books listing about 100 different ferries and steamer that used to run over the Clyde and things like that, which are not exactly interesting, but to me gave me this weird approach to the river.
Yeah, that's interesting. But there is a lot of fiction based. I mean, there's even a strand of Scottish literature which is called Clydesidism, this kind of dark and gritty, often male fiction that was written.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Exactly. Well, that was exactly the time. Difficult to find female characters in some of those books, I tell you. So, and I was reading an interview with you, and it mentioned, I guess, another collaboration, Planet Thanet. Is that the way of saying it, or Planet Thanet?
Yeah, Planet Thanet. Thanet is what used to be an island until the Middle Ages in Kent. So it's actually Ramsgate, Margate, Broadstairs, and a sprinkling of little villages. And the monks back in the Middle Ages drained from Holland. They drained that part of Kent and reunited the Isle of Thanet to Kent. But the name stuck. So in Thanet, we used to call ourselves, to say that we were weird because Planet Thanet is its own planet or something like that. Anyway, so when I put on my photo exhibition at the Glasgow gallery with the photos from Ramsgate, I thought that in order to give context to the photos and to the time, I would bring in some artists from Thanet, Ramsgate and Margate, to perform at the gallery. And they did. And so that whole series of events, there was like 5 live events at the gallery this summer, was Planet Thanet.
Excellent. So let's move on to your music, because I visited your Bandcamp page and you've got a sizable discography. There's a lot of music there. How did you first start getting involved in music? And I mean, you mentioned it was something that you became obsessed with, and I guess for a long time that's what you did, wasn't it? That was a musician, yeah. So how did you begin? How did it start? And what were the influences to kind of make you start?
Love. I am French. No, I met this Parisian guitar player in Paris in 1994, 95. I was already in Tucson at the time, and he came to visit, and we hit it off. And of course, as a way of romancing him, I used to write poetry, but I thought, well, this guy's got a guitar. What if I write him lyrics? Just repurpose poetry into lyrics. Maybe he'll start singing them, and then we'll be an item. And so we ended up getting married and collaborating on albums. But I was always in the background as the lyricist and the van driver at some point. But then, as I got more confident and as I got more immersed into the Tucson music scene, I realized, I was offered to sing with Calexico on their song Ballad of Cable Hog. I think it was their 1999 album. That was really the first time I was singing. So with people like Calexico pushing me onto the stage, I couldn't quite say no. So Joy Burns, the lead singer, offered to produce and record my first album, and I just couldn't say. I mean, I realized then that I was like, yes, this is going to be very scary. I'm terrified, but I can't back down. So it was all uphill or whatever hill from there, recording and touring and nonstop.
And Calexico are kind of known, I suppose, as Americana. That's a huge term. That's not really explaining anything, but certainly American music.
Yes.
Is that what you continue to do, or are your albums varied in terms of how they sound?
Well, it really depends on the collaborators, I suppose. What I realized is that something I was already exploring in Tucson with American musicians from that strand of Americana is a more theatrical, maybe French influenced way of performing. So I found myself more and more looking at collaboration that are on the verge of theater. We're using music, we're using visuals, of course, we're using text, and it's still me singing and performing. So I can do that. I've never learned any instruments, so naturally I'm going to be having to collaborate and pulling on everything I know how to do, from the visual to the text to the lyrics. The new project I have is very exemplary of that. It's an adaptation of a film. It's on stage, it's got my photos, and it's got 2 Glasgow musicians, and I have to sing just a few songs. The guys are picking up the slack.
And when's that going to be happening?
It's premiering in a month.
Oh, fantastic.
Germany and then Vienna. 3 dates only, just to get started. But I wasn't expecting, even a year ago, I wasn't sure I would ever get back on the stage.
Right.
But the Vienna Theatre commissioned the piece. They said, just adapt any artwork. And I said, well, I just watched that movie by Joanna Hogg called The Souvenir Part 1.
Yeah.
And there's a great soundtrack of 1980s music. There's Robert Wyatt and the Pretenders and the Specials. And somehow all those songs say something that the movie is not quite saying about what it meant to live in England in the 1980s, Thatcher, Lady Di, etc., that whole funky period. And so we're going to push the film into corners it doesn't want to get backed into. We're stripping away the narrative, the love story, it's all gone. We don't need that stuff. Just keeping the music, and we're also showing Knightsbridge in London.
Yeah, yeah.
Knightsbridge is like embassies, oligarchs, Herods, it's the peak London, peak UK, peak worldwide wealth and weird power. And I've been out there quite a bit to take photos in black and white, pretty disturbing ones. And so that plus the songs from the 80s, plus set design by my French set designer and stuff, it's going to be a weird, not Americana this time, but Englandia, I suppose. With 2 Glasgow musicians from that time era also. So we're good.
And you mentioned that you were ready to tour, and then lockdown and COVID came in, which stopped all of that. Was it an album that you were touring, a kind of recent?
No, it was the stage adaptation of my book, my memoir. It was a solo, it was more of a theatrical thing. So I was singing a few songs, but mostly I was reading huge chunks of my book. So it's a little bit different. And showing videos and stuff.
It sounds like when you take on a project, you never think of it as just, this is my book, this is my album. There's always like, well, how can we expand this and do other things with it? Is that fair?
No, it's just basically, how did I put myself in the corner and how do I get out of it?
So it's a way of working yourself out.
Yeah, why did I say yes? No, I didn't think I would. I was glad that, in a way, that tour got cancelled, because the subject matter of the book is pretty heavy, and I think I was ready to put down that flag and not be the bearer of that trauma.
Right.
I was done.
Yeah.
So in a way, some other things became more pressing. I don't think I would have gone back on stage if it hadn't been for meeting Andy Alston and James Kirk. And they were pretty much, Andy is touring with Del Amitri quite a bit, so that's not an issue. But James isn't doing too much staging, so in a way it felt like the 3 of us taking each other by the hands and going, okay, let's try it.
And you said at the moment there's only 3 gigs, but are you hoping to kind of take it else further?
Yeah, I'd like to bring it to the UK.
Have a hometown gig.
A hometown gig. Yeah, that'd be interesting, yeah.
And mention your memoir again. Would you think of writing anything else? Perhaps personal, perhaps something.
Yeah, I started as soon as I got to Ramsgate. It's a fiction book, but I also realized that because of the scale of it or the ambition of it, I would really need to think about it for several years. It's funny because I started thinking of it as I actually went to a point where I had a synopsis in a filmic sense.
Right.
Because I've done that. I've studied films. I can write a script. So I had that story down. But now I realize with the distance that that's just a starting point. It's gonna have to be a lot more than that, or a lot more personal and original. Anyway, long story. Catch me up in 10 years.
Okay, we'll do this again in 10 years
Yeah.
and we'll see how it's gone. But we haven't spoken about your films. You say you trained in film, you studied film. Can you give us an example of your work and the subjects you're interested in your films? Or does it vary with each one?
No, it used to be pretty clear. When I left film school, or when I was in film school in Los Angeles, it was documentary films.
Right.
So I directed a few of those for French TV and US TV. And then when I got to Tucson, started being more involved with music. Then all the filming or videos I was making were either music videos or had something to do with my music. When my second album came out, I adapted this very, very odd, very Andy Warhol Western called Lonesome Cowboys.
Right.
That's a film that he made with this crew from New York in Tucson in 1968. And I just adapted it. I turned it into a film. We rehearsed. We had a cast of 20, 25, 200 extras. We had a whole Western town that was given to us for free for the weekend with cows and a saloon with a dirt floor and cowboys shooting at each other for real, I mean, just for show.
Yeah.
And that was just an hour away from Tucson. So we all congregated on that town, and my request, my decision was to shoot the film in 24 hours top. So we had to redo a feature film in 24 hours, which meant we never stopped shooting for 24 hours. And of course, my cowboys, my people were all getting drunk or high as the hours went by. And I, as a director, I had to kind of keep it together and keep things going. So it's basically turned into this little documentary on Tucson. That's weird teenage border energy that is also in the music. The film was reflecting the music for that album.
And is that something that people can still find and see?
Yeah, it's on my Vimeo, on my VOD, but I think I left that one on YouTube for free somewhere. It's not a great film, but it was
sounds amazing.
One of the funniest, one of the best times of my life, one of the best 24 hours.
If you ever miss Tucson and Cowboys, do you know the bar in Glasgow called the Grand Old Opry?
No, but that sounds very
That's where
Texan.
people will get dressed up and have gun fights and all that. You know, if you ever want a little bit of home, then that's the place to go.
Okay.
And are there themes and ideas that you would say run through all your work?
Self-understanding. As I get older, I think it's become a powerful drive. I think that the drive before was basically more organic or sexual. It's like, oh, I want to understand that person or that place. There was like a desire to look outward. But anyway, but the running theme, I'm not sure.
That's interesting that, you know, you think maybe we all do that, you reflect more inwardly than outwardly as we get older. I don't know, I hadn't thought about that.
It's an internal travel more and more. I mean, I've seen enough places and people. I mean, never enough, but
yeah,
I can make up stories now within my head.
Yeah, you've met the characters.
Yeah.
You can, absolutely. And so, what's next for you? It sounds like...
well, we gotta start rehearsals. I mean, come on. Andy just got back from touring Germany with Del Amitri. James Kirk is... he's around, but it's like herding wild cats. I mean, me included. I'm probably the most feral of them all. But that we have to get started on rehearsals.
And of course, you've got that novel to finish then.
Yeah, no, again, 10 years. No, but there's the Knightsbridge photo projects. Really, I'm going back there next week. You know, kind of let the queues die down in London, so I could actually see it
Yeah.
as it usually is.
There probably are still a few people queuing who don't realise.
Then I will try. I will try on them the one maybe funny line I came up with for that whole thing. Let them eat Q.
Absolutely. That's what people were doing, I think.
Yep.
And so where can people find out or find your work and find your music? I mentioned Bandcamp and you said you've got a Vimeo page, but where's the best place?
I actually just get in touch with me, seriously. I'm not that well known that I don't respond personally to people. So send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. The only place I'm not is Spotify. I took everything down from Spotify. So, the usual streaming sites. Bandcamp's pretty good.
Bandcamp is pretty good. It's a
for
great
musicians.
place to hear your music and to buy your music as well. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day
Thank
to come and talk to
you.
me. It's been really a pleasure to do it, and in such a fantastic place
I know,
as well.
it didn't rain.
Exactly, we've lucked out. And we'll be back soon with someone completely different. Cheers.